Hey everybody, I just wanted to do a little video on variables in JavaScript and model something that I think students need to do more frequently. I'm going to share my screen here. So what I did is I built a little replet and these are the three variable declaration types you see in JavaScript. Not all languages require declaration words to declare variables, but JavaScript does. Although there are exceptions to that. Here are some exceptions. So here's a rule and here's some exceptions. I can just say x equals 5 in the console and it allows me to declare it. If I say x equals 5 here, I think it's going to have some feelings about that. Let's find out. Maybe not. Okay. Well, that means that I want to research something. Declaration of variables in JavaScript. Okay, so we got W3 schools. I think documentation is always a good place to start. Using nothing. Okay, I didn't know that. So we've got var, we've got let, and we've got x, y, and z. And so it's not telling me the type. I wonder if there's a way to see the variable sort of declaration type, or if we can infer it from the behavior. Aha, that's an interesting question. So let's put that on pause for a second. We want to understand more. Want to understand more about declaring with no declaration word. Okay. So let's see. I wanted to start with, let's get rid of this because I mean, I do want to show you this in a second, but so I was just playing around here, starting with declaration and redeclaring and assignment and reassigning. Okay, so let's take a look at these two things here. So here I have declared and assigned variables. Age is 10. The variable Ben is assigned to the string Ben. And I'm going to now attempt to redeclare both of these variables. So I'll say let age equals 9 and let Ben equals Jim. And I just want to see what happens. Okay, so did not like redeclaring age. I should have changed this to const, but I didn't get to this line, right? Remember that when JavaScript's sort of compiling, it's like reading top to bottom, it hits an error and it's like, I'm done. It's like a syntax error. This is not okay. You can't declare a new identifier, age, which has already been declared. All right, let me take this out now. So let cannot be redeclared. Can't have the same variable in same scope that has the same name / identifier. Seems like the word that they're using here in the error. So that's probably a better technical word to use. All right, now let's try the same with const. Identifier Ben has already been declared. So same rule, let / const cannot be redeclared. And now let us try var crazy equals hey, and then do a var redeclaration. Crazy equals 10. No problem. Okay, so this is the big, I think one of the big differences between let, const, and var, right? Var can be redeclared in the exact same scope. See Bella back here. Bella, what you doing? All right. So that's an important distinction. And now all of a sudden this makes sense to me that var could potentially create some problems, because if you have, 400 lines of code and you're like, well, this name makes sense here, because we often say, try to name your variables things that are descriptive of what they are. So in one part of your code, you say var name equals whatever. 400 lines of code later, you say var name equals whatever. Well, you just redeclared var. So now an interesting question is, what is the value of var? I assume here it would be hey, and here it would be 10. But let's find out. So we also want to get into hoisting at some point. Okay, here we go. So this console log really doesn't need to be here right now, because we're not that interested in the const and the let. We're more interested in this var situation. And we're totally focused on redeclaring, is it possible? And we just found out for var, it is possible in the same scope to redeclare. Okay, interesting. So kind of what I would have expected. At this point, it was hey, and then after I redeclared it and reassigned it, it's now 10. Just curious, if I redeclare it and don't assign it a value, does it overwrite the other value and become undefined? No, it doesn't. It's still equal to 10, which is curious, because if I do this up top, just declaring that there is a variable called crazy and then console logging it, it should be undefined first, then hey, then 10. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I'm modeling here is, like, I want to understand something, and one of the ways that you understand something is you test your ideas out in the console, and that takes a little bit of skill to kind of get used to how to do that. But I think that that's an important principle of understanding and learning. Because a lot of times when you're looking at curriculum, you do a lab, you're like, okay, I passed the test, it's good, but you want to sort of push yourself to ask questions like, do I understand this concept? How do I know if I understand this concept? What could I do with the knowledge that I have? So this is a way of doing all that. At this point, I think I have a hypothesis I want to test, which is, remember that I showed you that in a console, we can just say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of stuff. We can say, you can see there's a lot of things happening in the background here. Okay, I need to open up a page with less going on. All right, here we go. Name, I'm just going to use a different one. So let's call it night equals 10. So I declared a variable. I did not specify var, let, or const. My hypothesis, and I remember if I read it somewhere, is that that is a var variable. So that means I should be able to redeclare it. Var night equals yay. So now if I say night, it's yay, right? So I think without the declaration word, the assumption is that it's essentially a var in that scope, which means we could redeclare it if we want. Because if I said let night equals 7, then I'm blocking saying var night equals, let's check. I know that I can't reassign. Sorry, I know that I can't redeclare it. Var night equals what? Damn it. So one of the things that's interesting is the console kind of behaves differently in terms of rules. Yeah, because this shouldn't really happen, right? We showed that in here, if I say, well, let's just do what I just did. Okay, so we're exploring this. Okay, so we're saying crazy equals Okay. Then I'm going to redeclare, because I think my hypothesis is crazy is actually a var. So var crazy equals 98, and then console log crazy. It should be 98, and I shouldn't get an error. That's my hypothesis. Great. Now, can I change from a var to a let? Let crazy equals yo. Does not like that. And that happened on line 7. So the fact that it had already been declared, we know that let and const cannot be redeclared. And so the fact that this already exists means that this line of code does not work, which is what I was expecting in the console. If I said let 9 equals 7, then I shouldn't be able to say let 9 equals 1. But it's interesting with the console, something I don't understand about how console is scoped and what the significance of that is. And so I think that the evidence here that I can do this shows me that this is a var. Let's switch this to let, and let's see, because this now should break, because if my hypothesis is correct that this is actually a var, then this should still not be okay, because I can't redeclare. So the error is slightly different because it sees that I have this. This is about hoisting here. The value variables can be accessed before initialization. This is kind of a plain definition of hoisting. Var yes, let no. So the way they're interpreting this now is not that we were declaring a variable here with nothing, but that I was trying to assign it a value before I initialized it, which doesn't allow me to test that hypothesis. And I would get the same thing if I put const here. And even if I wasn't assigning a value, if I said console log crazy and I move that up, it would still be a problem. So let no, const no, but we already showed that var is okay. And in fact, let's do something even weirder. Let's put the console log here with the assignment and declaration here and see what happens. Okay, so it allows me to not have an error because this is a var, but it can't see that the value is 98 because that assignment hasn't happened yet. Interesting. So hoisting variables can be accessed before initialization. Not a good enough definition. The assignments happen when they happen, I mean, I guess is a way to say it. Okay, now let's consider assignment and reassigning. Well, actually, before I move on from this discussion of the declaration, let me just point out this thing. So I'm going to bring age and Ben back into here. This is a pretty common thing that I see happening. So I have these variables age and Ben, and then I have the words age and Ben inside the parentheses. So what I think it's important to understand is that putting words in the parentheses of your function is essentially declaring new variables scoped with var. Nothing, literally, since we said we didn't put an identifier here or here, but what's interesting to me is that we know that we can't redeclare age and Ben, but we're doing it here. And just to be clear, if I say var age, var Ben, those are going to be problems, I think. Yeah, I can't do it. Can't do that. Can't do that. But I can do this. And this is because the scope is different. This is a functional scope. And so what I'm saying is that I have a variable age and Ben for this function that is not the same as this variable age or this variable Ben. So that's why you see hey and 5 here, because, well, first of all, nothing happens until I actually use my function. But once I use my function, the arguments get passed in and then the values get shown. And then I went a level deeper. This is function scope, right, inside the curly braces. And then I went to block scope, which is inside of this interior function for the callback function for map. I'm declaring age again, another age, and it knows the difference. It knows that this age is talking about this. If I was hoping that this age referred to this or to this, that would be a problem. And this is sometimes where some variable confusion comes in, is using words and names for things and sort of overlapping. I should probably get an example of this, but anyways, so I think that's interesting because it's kind of like redeclaring, but it's redeclaring in a different scope, and so somehow it's okay. Feel like there's more to understanding that I probably need to like dig into myself. So just to kind of finish up with assignment and reassigning, this is where let and const diverge, because with let, I can say age equals 15, but with Ben, I cannot reassign to say, oh, I actually wanted that to be the string John. So what we should get here is an error on line 12. Can't have an assignment to a constant variable. Now, sometimes people say you can't change a const because the word const stands for constant. So you're like, oh, it's just, that's what it means. But actually, that's not a good description of it. It's not a technically sound description of it, because there's lots of things that can be changed when they're const. So a good example would be an array. Let's get rid of this little thing. Okay, so 2, 4, 10. And now what I want to do to Ben is I'm going to push 12, and then I want to prove to you that Ben has changed. Okay. So no error, right? Ben.push was not a problem. And now you can see that the variable Ben has this extra value in it. So what does it mean that it hasn't changed? Well, it's still an array, so that hasn't changed, but it now has another value, so that has changed. So changes is not a very good technical word. The key here is the reassignment. When you're reassigning something, you're going to run into problems. So for instance, the plus equals operator is actually equivalent to age equals age plus 15. And so if I console log age, I'm going to see that I have a new value for age here. So instead of 10, I'm seeing 25. Okay, no problem. That was a let. But if I had made this a const, then I would be having a problem, because plus equals essentially is a reassignment of the variable. So now I'm going to get an error on my plus equals line. There it is, line 11. Can't do it because this is now a const, it can't be reassigned. So var and let can be reassigned. I didn't show that for var, but I leave that to you to kind of explore. But const cannot be reassigned. Okay, hope that was helpful. I think that finding ways to play around is important. I generally recommend just using the JavaScript console in any browser, but this has proven to me that there are some weird things about it just in terms of variable declarations. So might not be a great thing to explore in the console. That's what Replit is good for. This is more like what you have when you compile a file, and this is more like your phase 1 project. So it's nice to kind of get in here and play around and also kind of get used to how this works. I use the refresh button to make it kind of re-examine the code, recompile the code. I have the wrench button here to turn the console on so I can see what's happening. And if I get errors, then I can kind of try to read them and interpret them. In phase 1, that's not the most important skill. It's something that you will just start encountering. If you've done labs, you've seen plenty of errors. But But it's definitely something that builds over time. Your ability to read errors becomes more and more important. So something that you can start modeling and practicing here. All right. Be good, work hard.